One of the problems we've faced in today's world of internet and network communications is the development of malware. Malware, or malicious software, is software written specifically to do harm to systems or to circumvent controls. We can say that a bug or a flaw is not malware. Malware represents the type of software which was written intentionally to do harm, not just a mistake. Now, malware has taken on many different forms over the years and continues to adapt and to evolve according to, every time we come up with a good defense, the malware authors are going to have to develop a new way to be able to spread it. Now, malware has spread in many different ways over the years. In the early days, we called it the sneaker net or the running shoe network, where malware spread via floppy disks being passed from person to person. And we saw also the development of the Morris worm, which would spread across networks. We've seen many types of malware spread via email, exploiting vulnerabilities within operating systems. We've seen attacks, for example, against various weak implementations. We've seen a lot of it spreading today through things like what we call drive-by hacking. A person visiting a website which is infected, and that spreading then to their machine. Now, one of the things that makes malware a little bit difficult is the fact that while some malware does damage outright and it's immediately noticeable, there's a lot of malware that can get on a system but does not make any obvious change. It sits there quietly in the background, perhaps opening a back door for the attacker to get in and steal data and capture passwords. In some cases, malware will be like a zombie sitting on there waiting for a command to do something as part of a botnet, for example. So some of the types of malware, we often hear the term virus, and we use the term virus for almost everything, even though a lot of malware is not a virus. But viruses have been around really since the development of the work of Dr. Fred Cohen, who talked about this as a potential risk that is coming. And they started as boot sector infectors on the boot sector of an infected floppy drive, have moved, of course, to macro viruses, file infector viruses, polymorphic viruses, the many different types that are actually out there. And a virus itself is something that quite often requires then the user to do something. The virus gets on the machine, but quite often requires the user to open the attachment or open the link before they're actually then properly infected with that virus. That's a little different from something like a worm. A worm tends to spread on its own. It takes advantage of a hole, for example, or a vulnerability in an operating system or in an application. And the user doesn't need to do something to be infected with a worm. Quite simply, if they have that vulnerability, that worm then can spread to their machine. We also have, in many cases today, when malware spreads, it'll use more than one type, the mechanism to spread. Even going back more than a decade ago now, when we saw the development of Code Red and NIMDA. NIMDA itself actually had 5 different ways to spread. Code Red opened a vulnerability that NIMDA exploited. And NIMDA itself could spread 3 ways as what we would call a traditional virus, and 2 ways of what we'd call a traditional worm. So even if some of the ways that the virus would try to spread were blocked, hopefully it would find another way that it could still, of course, spread to other victims. One dangerous type of malware is a logic bomb. And a logic bomb is a type of malware that gets onto a person's machine and sits there waiting then for either a date or an event. So that, for example, if a logic bomb got onto a person's machine, it could sit there waiting until, say, a good example is Michelangelo. On Michelangelo's birthday, then that logic bomb exploded and did its damage. But it could sit on a person's machine for months until that date came, which meant that even things like backups were infected as well. We've had others, a court case going on right now in the Midwestern United States, of a couple of employees of a company who had implanted a logic bomb software so that if they were ever laid off, it would automatically then do mass deletions of that company's files. Those are logic bombs, in that case, sent to trigger on an event. A Trojan horse, well, just like the famous horse of Troy, is a type of malware that might look nice but have then dangerous content inside. We see this a lot today with mobile apps. A mobile app that a person downloads onto their smartphone has, of course, a fun little game and some nice thing they like to do. But what they didn't realize when they downloaded that mobile app, they also downloaded content inside which was stealing data from their system, sending back, for example, confidential information, tracking their movements. So these types of Trojans are something where it's actually then something malicious buried within something beautiful, shall we say. We've also had a number of developments of what we call keystroke loggers. And keystroke loggers can be either hardware or software based. And all they do is capture everything a person types in on their keyboard. And when a person first starts in the morning, they'll type in, for example, their password. As they are typing in emails, the keystroke logger just captures everything that's being typed in that can be then recovered by the attacker, who might now have that person's passwords and other confidential information. A very dangerous type of malware is a RAT, Remote Access Trojan. And this is something used a lot by APTs, or Advanced Persistent Threats, where, for example, an organization wants to conduct espionage against a target company. What they may well do is attempt to break into the victim company and implant a remote access Trojan into that company's network. The purpose of the RAT is it will allow then the company to then get access to their competitors' files, maybe their marketing and financial plans, at any time in the future they want. It enables that remote access that can be used in espionage. And this is a serious problem where we've seen in a number of cases where companies have had remote access Trojans on their systems literally for years capturing information.